dans l'espace global mondial. Nous avons un équilibre et des institutions de gouvernance du monde qui datent de l'après-deuxième guerre mondiale, qui malheureusement ne prennent pas en compte le continent africain. Mais pas que le continent africain, bien entendu. Il y a d'autres parties du monde, mais malheureusement le continent africain n'est que très faiblement représenté lorsqu'on prend le Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies, lorsqu'on prend les institutions du Bretton Woods qui gouvernent aujourd'hui le monde. Nous sommes malheureusement écartés de cette gouvernance mondiale. Alors, qu'est-ce que l'Afrique pourrait faire pour changer cela?
That global governance system. So what Africa can do in order to change it, I think we can say, first of all, that as the African people, we have to put the good governance systems in the first place, because the whole world is looking as an outsider to Africa to see what's going on. And if we can't give them a good appearance, a good view, then it's so difficult to have our voice heard by the global world. And of course, our people want their governments to be better, to have better solutions for the societies. Africa should not be always a source of problem. We should be able to find solutions to our own problems. But more importantly, we have to, I think, also to also deal with international organizations. As you know, throughout the continent, there are certain discussions about the reform of certain international bodies. And we know that today in the Security Council, it is thought to have at least 2 more seats to represent Africa as well. But this should start in Africa, and the right to veto should change.
That state relations, that society-state relations should perhaps, in a changing context, should be reorganized. That's what we can say. But also when we look at Africa, we talk about regional orders. I mean, without establishing regional orders, it's difficult that Africa can have a good voice at the international level. If you look at Africa in each part of the continent, I mean, you see regional orders are in turmoil. So there is a huge global engagement from outside to Africa. But the question is whether this global engagement is helping Africa on the one hand, but at the same time, that's creating an opportunity that each state, they are having bilateral relation with the international actor, so that is diminishing as an African agency acting together. So whether that is sustainable, that is very much helpful for Africa in the long term, that should be a little bit questions, I think. So that's as a brief I can say.
All right, and Leo Kaku Adom, Minister of Foreign Affairs, African Integration and Ivorian Abroad, Republic of Cote d'Ivoire. Given the shifting regional order, does ECOWAS require structural changes in its regional cooperation perspective?
Merci beaucoup de la question. Je voudrais parler en français. Non, je parlerai certainement de la CEDEAO, mais c'est une question qui s'adresse en réalité à toutes les régions de l'Afrique. Je pense que notre salut se trouve dans l'organisation des communautés régionales. Et de ce point de vue, des efforts ont été faits. Il suffit simplement d'y croire et d'y aller avec la bonne foi. Le problème dans nos régions, c'est un peu le problème de la gouvernance et surtout de la démocratie et la stabilité donc des États qui induit justement la création de la richesse qui doit être partagée, qui faire en sorte que le chômage des jeunes, par exemple, soit réduit à sa plus simple expression. Au lieu de compter aujourd'hui 820 millions de jeunes Africains en âge de travailler. Alors, la situation de l'Afrique est telle que les questions, les défis qui se posent à nous sont tels qu'il faut peut-être aller par cercle concentré, par subsidiarité. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle nous croyons en ECOWAS, comme vous avez dit, donc à la CEDEAO, qui a fait beaucoup de progrès depuis une cinquantaine d'années, qui a fait beaucoup de progrès. Et nous sommes conscients que seule l'intégration de nos États, la mutualisation de nos efforts et de nos intelligences peut nous permettre de sortir de la situation difficile que vit notre continent en réalité. Et donc, les comités régionaux sont encouragés, et également les organisations politiques régionales sont encouragées dans une perspective de progrès mutuel, de développement solidaire et d'intégration qui peut favoriser le développement.
Thank you. Just based on what you've said, let me do a follow-up question with Maria Manuela, the Foreign Affairs Minister. We are talking about ECOWAS, and he's explained it very well in terms of the regional integration. But when we do that, we've seen some members, okay, let me put it, former members of ECOWAS, and I'm talking about Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, have left ECOWAS, and they formed their own alliance. And ECOWAS said, despite the 3 countries leaving, we will still give room for free trade. But just recently, we saw a 0.5% duty put on imports. Don't you think that will affect what he's talked about in terms of integration?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I want to thank also the panelists and the opportunity to be here. I'm from Southern Africa. I'm from Southern Africa, but definitely want to ask me the question about West Africa and the ECOWAS. I think the free trade area, continental free trade area, is for the whole continent. And then what we're supposed to do as a continent is to reduce all the technical barriers, because if you look to the trade between ourselves, the continent, the level is very low, very, very low. But because of why? It's what my brother have said. The infrastructures, especially the communication. I remember once a minister from Zimbabwe was saying that for him to go to Benin from Zimbabwe, he has to go to France, or he has to go to UK. So I think that what happened in ECOWAS, they are brothers, they'll come back together. They're their brother, they've been together. You know, families sometimes, these things happen. They'll be together. And that's why even ECOWAS took a decision that those countries, what they're doing in those countries as ECOWAS, they will continue to do. So there is no backup. So I think definitely when you ask me the question about SADC, I'll come back. Thank you.
Okay, so then from where you sit, what are the geopolitical, economic, this question is directed to you, sorry. So what are the geopolitical, economic, and strategic implications of global powers like the United States? We're talking about China and the EU competing for influence in Africa.
Recently, my president, he's a new president, he has been there for 3 months. The American ambassador was concerned and said that, oh, but there is a lot of influence of China. And then he says, can you just look at Maputo, just for you to see to cross from Maputo to the bay, the other side. There is a bridge there. It's the beautiful and wonderful bridge that we have from China, infrastructures. So that why US is not building a road, connect the south of Mozambique to the northern part of Mozambique. So why we compete? We don't need to compete. Each one has its own place in our country. Each one has been there historically or not historically. China, for us, Mozambique, supported us for the independence of Mozambique. But the US has been there also. So I don't, and then we have EU. So I don't think that they need to compete. They need to be there and help Mozambique and the other countries that are here develop the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Olivier Jean Patrick Nduhungirehe. I got it right. So how can Africa's rising influence in multilateral platforms reshape global governance structures? And how does Africa's substantial voting power within the international organizations actually influence global decision-making, and what strategies can be employed to further amplify this voice? I'm asking you this question because now we are moving into what my brother from Benin, the minister, was getting us into in terms of the African voice in the international platform.
Thank you very much. The Africa's influence could offset the traditional global governance structure, bringing in a neutral party of non-aligned countries that we are as Africans, and we can play an important role in this global structure. But of course, we need to speak with one voice. The African voices can be voiced louder if it is spoken with together as one. And we talked about the reform of the UN Security Council, and we agree. We have this Ezulwini consensus that through which African Union have requested 2 permanent seats in the UN Security Council with a veto right, as long as it exists. And this is what actually my colleague from Benin was saying. Our initial preference as Africans is to get rid of the veto right, because no country should veto or take a decision for the whole world. But we know that we are realistic. We know that it will be extremely difficult from the current countries, the 5 countries that have the veto, to relinquish that right. This is why we say that we should have that right as long as it exists. But for Rwanda, we have our position on this, the 2 seats. It's not to give 2 seats to African countries as such. It's to have a seat, one of the seats, given to the African Union Commission to implement the African policy, peace and security policy. And then the other seat will be given to an African country on a rotational basis, so that we can have a say in African affairs, because 2/3 of the conflicts we have now on the continent are African issues. On the 2/3 on the agenda of the Security Council are African issues. But we also welcome that the African Union is now a member of the G20, and we believe that we could continue that movement and having also a say in other institutions, especially financial institutions and technical institutions. But definitely, Africa is a rising continent, and we should ensure that we have a bigger and a stronger voice in the international arena. Thank you.
All right. Foreign Affairs Minister of Republic of Liberia, let me ask you this question. There is a book that has been written by the president of Turkey, President Erdogan, and he's talking about the world can be a fairer place. And one of the suggestions is put in that book. He's saying that we not only need to push for 2 seats. Why can't we have the United Nations Security Council have at least 5 representation from different countries where we will have different people of different religion, different political, representative of different political stand, so that every voice is heard. Because he says that it is 5 countries that are making a decision for the entire world what he's talking about. So do you think we need to increase this number of seats at the United Nations Security Council? And he goes ahead to say that let not the power only sit, the power of making decision, let it not sit with the UNSC, but let them now report to the United Nations General Assembly. What would you like to say about that?
Thank you for the opportunity. And I think the first thing I would say is if the conversation is about Africa's role in world politics, then Africa needs to go back to its diplomatic heritage. And before the modern state, Africa had kingdoms. We had Ethiopia, we had Mali, we had empires, we had kingdoms, and diplomacy ruled. We had emissaries, we had pacts, we had treaties. It worked. There was dialogue, there was consensus. We had mechanisms such as we have in Liberia, the Palava Hut. We had the Kachacha courts of Rwanda. We had local mechanisms that worked where there was actually dialogue. Today, the UN is a place where people go and preach, they scream, and they leave. Nobody dialogues. So what are we saying? We need to reimagine democracy in a very serious way, and reimagine diplomacy in a very serious way. When we're talking about inclusion, Africa needs to be rising up and talking about where we're coming from. You know, there's a proverb that says, if you don't know where you're coming from, you won't know where you are going. And we come from a rich history of diplomacy, and we need to go back to that place. And the African Union, in order to have a permanent seat at the council, needs to be a place of dialogue, not a place where we model the UN, where the preaching and the screaming happens and we walk away. We need to go back to where we used to sit and have conversations, dialogue, and look at the mutual interests of all African states, regardless of size and GDP, and looking at everyone having an equal voice in Africa before Africa can rise up and take a greater prominent role. And we must take that role. I call it equilibrium diplomacy.
All right, so based on what you're saying, my follow-up question would be, so then can we say that how the AU affairs in the G20 may also be an opportunity to reassess or assess its international role?
Most definitely, the African Union needs to take a look within. We have had regional economic commissions that have worked for the purposes for which they serve at the time. They no longer work the way they should for what we're confronting in the future. And we need to look at how we restructure ourselves as Africa so that when we rise to the fullest of our potential, we rise as one continent with one voice, speaking for the youth across, whether they are Francophone or Anglophone, no matter where they find themselves, whether in the Sahara or on the waters, that Africa must realize in a multipolar world, we are one pole. Africa is a pole. So when you're discussing multipolarity, Africa is one pole. And how that pole is grounded will determine how that pole moves forward.
Thank you. So, Mahmoud Thabit Kombo, Minister for Foreign Affairs and East Africa Cooperation, United Republic of Tanzania. So what are some of the issues then that affects, just a follow-up question to what has been said, what are some of the issues that affects on the ability of Africans to engage as equal partners in the global order?
Thank you very much for this question, and I really thank Antalya Forum for organizing this and all the panelists. I would like to start with, first of all, we need to integrate ourselves because we are not really integrated if you talk about Africa. I'm a believer of our sub-regional bodies, SADC and EAC, which Tanzania is a member, and they are more effective than our continental body. And we usually go sometimes with the agendas of sub-regional bodies to the continental bodies. But we, as Africans, first of all, are divided. If you take, traditionally we're divided Anglophony, Francophony, the Arab North, and a little bit of Portuguese also. Now they have their union of Portuguese countries, I think is about 4 of them. This is a division that was created by purpose. My dear sister from Liberia said it clearly. If we go back and look our tradition, it was different. But secondly, our borders were drawn colonially, and that's why you find some of our neighbors, the main source of conflict is also the colonial borders, which were drawn, and some of them ethnic, tribalistic, etc. So we need to go back to the drawing table. This all was designed for a purpose. If Africa is united, it's a major strength, because Africa now is the key in rare earth minerals, is the key in food security in the world, is the key in energy security in the world, taking all the resources that we are blessed with, even water resource, which some of the top future predictions are coming, that there's going to be water shortage. Africa is blessed by fresh water bodies more than others. But when we go, even in the continental body, we are divided. Whenever we select our candidates for the region, we are divided into these 4 major blocks. And this was designed for a purpose with major powers. It was, you mentioned about the five countries ruling the whole world through Security Council. This was by design. It didn't come by accident. This was by design. And if you look at the same influence is also applied to the African unity that we have. So we are very much now focused on our sub-regional bodies, and we usually go with our sub-regional bodies. We have seen them more effective, more delivering, and with better negotiating terms. We have tariffs, cross-border tariffs, which are more effective and working very closely rather than the continental bodies. So I think it will take some time before we strengthen our sub-regional bodies to go to the main continental body. I'm not talking even about the world. That will come at a later stage. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. Minister for Foreign Affairs, Republic of Ghana, Samuel. In what ways has the increasing global interest in Africa translated into concrete diplomatic, economic, and security partnerships?
Well, thank you very much. And let me also commend colleagues for their contributions, and to thank the government of Turkey for putting this Antalya Diplomacy Forum together. My brother from Tanzania was talking about time, that is going to take us a lot of time to meet some of the objectives that we have set for ourselves. But I must say respectfully that we don't have time, and we have to go beyond business as usual. If you look at the current geopolitical climate, it's clear that Africa is not going to be the priority of the so-called traditional partners. We have never been, and we will not be moving forward. The Europeans are focusing on defense. It's all about the Russia-Ukraine war. They are rechanneling their financial muscle away from international aid to defense and how to combat their perceived threats from Russia. You've seen what the United States of America has done. Africa has been hit in multiple dimensions, from deportations to cutting aid. In the health sector in Ghana alone, we had to look for $156 million in our budget that was approved just 2 weeks ago by our parliament to take care of the gap that the USAID withdrawal created. And so this reality should tell us that we are not anybody's priority. We cannot wait for anybody, and we should not be relying on anybody. We should depend on ourselves. We are a continent of 1.4 billion people. Huge market, $3.4 trillion gross domestic product. What else are we waiting for? We have all the resources we need to develop, from oil and gas, gold, diamond, bauxite,
timber, water resources, and most importantly, the people, a very young population. We are the youngest continent in the world. So we have the employment base. If we train our youth, give them the skills they need, we have the markets, we have the resources. Why are we here waiting for anybody? And why should we be interested in who wants to have influence in Africa? Let's put ourselves together, have our own influence, call the shots. We have all the resources. God has blessed us with everything we need. And what is happening now should tell us that nobody out there really cares about us.
All right.
We should care about ourselves. We have the Agenda 2063. We've been talking about the Africa Atlantic Gas Pipeline Project. Let's make it happen. We've been talking about the corridor that should connect 5 West African countries, the Abidjan-Lomé corridor. We've been spending too much time on feasibility studies. We know what to do.
All right.
Let's get to work and let us liberate our continent. That's what we should be focusing on.
All right, and I like what you've said, that it all begins with us as Africans and the leadership of the African continent. So, Mehmet, I mean, then the question that we seek to answer is whether Africa has the political clout. Do you think we as Africans and as a continent, we have the political clout to change the dynamics of engagement in international institutions, and whether that clout is enough in terms of influence and policy outcomes?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm sure there is. But the issue here, I mean, as a systemic transformation is happening at global level, the question is how Africa wants to locate itself in this transformation. Yes, Minister mentions there are lots of opportunities, yes, but how to operationalize this at institutional level, at also local level? I think that's the biggest question. For example, in my understanding, someone from outside, I think the best thing would be Africa should compete with each other. If Africa competes with other continents, I think it doesn't create any opportunity, because Africa is too big to act alone. So each region, if they compete each other, I think that would create more energy, and then that would create more opportunities. That should be the straightforward. And also, I mean, another issue is what I see from outside. Yes, Africa has lots of institutions at regional level, international level, but what I see, they are losing their political visions, although they talk a lot, but they are becoming more technical and bureaucratical institutions, including African Union or many other institutions. So then to focus too much on the institutions may not lead something. Perhaps Africa needs leadership, intellectual leadership, and that requires serious questions. As the world is transforming, what is the future of Africa? How they should relocate itself in this transforming? Whether Africa wants to become a bystander or they want to be a proactive actor. That's the question that I think all the ministers here can respond.
All right. I want to open the, and to give our audience this time to ask a question, because I believe they have questions to ask. So you'll just get note of the question that will be asked. But let me begin with my question. I'll be a bit selfish here. And this question can be answered by any of the representatives of the countries that are here, because it touches, what I'm about to ask touches on, like all of us are affected. The question is, as Africa navigates the internal and the cross-border challenges, such as extremism, migration, and climate change, what role can international cooperation play in fostering resilience and stability? Okay, I'll start with Sarah, a minute, and then Samuel, a minute.
Yes, so I believe it goes back to the original point we're making in the first place. International cooperation is about how we move past these institutions and go back to who we are as Africans. We're families that have been disconnected by lines drawn by others. And we need to start discussing. I was recently in Burkina Faso. I was recently in Mali. Last night I was with Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And I was discussing with them, the tribe I come from in Liberia, the Vai tribe, emanates from the Malian Empire. What are we saying? Whether there's ECOWAS or there's not ECOWAS, we're still families in West Africa. And so we need to move past all of that and start to have dialogue, real dialogue about how we work together to ensure that we protect our borders, we protect our young people from extremism. We are the last frontier, the Mano River Union countries, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. We're the last frontier from those from the Sahel. So we started security cooperation with Burkina Faso, with Mali. We're discussing those things because at the end of the day, with or without those institutions, the threats are real. And we must confront them together.
All right, Foreign Affairs Minister, Ghana.
Absolutely agree with my sister Sarah. I'm from the Ewe ethnic group. I go into Togo and I'm speaking the same Ewe language, same culture, same traditions. I go into Benin, same Ewe language, same culture, same traditions. Ivory Coast, same. The Ivorian foreign minister is here. He'll tell you about the Akan roots, which transcend Ivory Coast all the way into Ghana. Multiple regions, from Ashanti region, Western, Central region. So these are artificial boundaries, part of the challenges that we face. It's created all of these needless tensions, an identity crisis. And we really need to take the African integration agenda seriously. I mean, if you want to travel a short distance from Ghana to Benin, you can find a direct flight. You have to be struggling through Togo and then to Benin. You want to travel to Namibia, to Mozambique from Ghana, you can find a direct flight. You have to travel to Europe before coming back into Africa. So we need to deal with these barriers. We need to invest in infrastructure, and we need to really take the Pan-African agenda more seriously than we have been. It's been about lip service, and we continue to fall prey to the divide and rule, which has continued to leave us behind. And we forget that we have always been a united people, strong empires, with a certain very enviable history, which unfortunately we have allowed the colonialists and the imperialists to divide us. So it comes back to leadership. It comes back to building strong institutions. It comes back to tackling corruption, which is at the heart of a lot of the horrible negotiations which take place. You wonder, I mean, why did this leader sign off all of this gold, all of this this uranium to another country? And it was all because there was a certain greed and personal interest at the center of those negotiations. So it comes back to having the right kind of moral, ethical leadership that will send us to the next level.
All right. Before I get Tanzania, Benin, and Rwanda, okay, before I get everyone respond to my question, because it looks like it's elicited a lot of interest, I would like to know if there's any question from the audience before. Any? We have one there. We have one there. Any? We'll just take those two, and then we get you respond to the question that I'd asked. Then we give time to the two questions, and then you will direct your question to anyone or a specific country that you want to respond to that question. Okay. So we begin with Benin. Then from Benin, we'll go to Rwanda, and then Tanzania. And then, okay, we'll, from there, like this, minus, yeah. Okay, and then when we are done, we'll take your question, and then the last question. Thank you. A minute each for your response.
Thank you very much. Je pense que tous les sujets qui ont été évoqués par les collègues sont importants. Après, notre rôle aussi en tant que leader, c'est de trouver des solutions. Et je pense que la première des solutions, c'est celle de la libre circulation des personnes sur notre continent. Si nous ne sommes pas capables nous-mêmes de poser les vraies questions, nous n'allons pas pouvoir évoluer. Autour de cette table, il y a seulement 3 pays où les Africains peuvent aller sans demander de visa. Le reste du temps, aujourd'hui, vous êtes un Africain, vous avez besoin de 27 visas pour circuler sur le continent africain. Et il est plus facile pour un Européen, pour un Américain de circuler sur le continent africain que pour un Africain lui-même. Donc, qu'est-ce que nous proposons à notre jeunesse? Moi, je pense qu'il faut absolument que nous puissions trouver des solutions rapides et des exemples clairs et précis. Régler la question de la libre circulation des personnes. Parce que si un jeune béninois peut aller entreprendre au Mozambique ou en Tanzanie demain, les liens seront plus forts entre nous. Aujourd'hui, les liens ne sont pas forts entre nous simplement parce que nos jeunes ne peuvent pas voyager sur le continent africain. Et tous les jeunes, la majorité des jeunes aujourd'hui, ont le regard tourné vers l'Europe. Parce qu'ils se disent que c'est là-bas l'Eldorado. Donc je pense qu'il faut que nous réglions cette question de... Parce que nous passons notre temps à dire... Nous avons hérité les frontières de la colonisation. En 1963, nous avons dit on ne touche pas aux frontières héritées de la colonisation. Mais en même temps, nous ne faisons rien pour que nos populations puissent circuler librement sur le continent africain. Et donc, en faisant le lien avec la ZLECAf, il est important de pouvoir se dire que le potentiel économique du continent africain, et la question que moi, les jeunes du Bénin me posent régulièrement, c'est à faire pour qui ? Si moi, jeune béninois, je ne peux pas aller entreprendre dans un autre pays africain, est-ce qu'on est en train de créer la ZLECAf pour les Européens, pour les Chinois, pour les Turcs? Ou est-ce qu'on la crée pour nous, Africains? Donc je pense qu'il faut que nous réglions ce problème, que nous réglions la problématique de la gouvernance, la problématique de la lutte contre la corruption. Et lorsque nous aurons réussi à créer ce cercle vertueux sur notre continent, nous allons réaliser le plein potentiel de notre continent parce que nous n'avons besoin de personne. Je vais m'en arrêter là. Merci.
Wow, pertinent, serious questions right there. Very serious questions that you've asked. And I hope we'll find a solution. And that solution will be gotten by these foreign affairs ministers here because you work very closely with the heads of states of your countries. But you've raised very serious, legitimate concerns that needs to be addressed if Africa is to move forward in terms of having our voices heard at the international level. We need to work as a team. Minister for Rwanda.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues. You know, Africa is the richest continent on earth. We are still a developing country, which is a paradox, but we are the richest continent. We have vibrant youth, 18 years of median age. I think by 2050, we'll have a third of the world youth will be African youth. So, but we still have challenges. We have conflicts, we have issues of bad governance. So we need first and foremost to solve those issues by addressing the root causes. You know, the root causes of all conflicts on the continent are always the same: the good, bad governance, lack of opportunity for the youth, and youth in employment, discrimination. So we should tackle those issues, because if we don't tackle them today, they will come back in 5-10 years. You know, I was reading something that 2/3 of conflicts, new conflicts that we have on the continent, are relapse of previous conflicts that were not properly settled back then. So we need really to work on solving those issues. And then we were talking about cross-border issues and colonial borders. So we can solve these issues by really regional integration, free movement of people, and partnership. You know, as I was saying, that Africa is a rich continent. We have natural resources. We have 30% of the critical minerals of the world are in Africa. If we decide to work, to partner, to invest together, we can really add value and be really be able to get the benefits of our collaboration. But otherwise, of course, there are external powers who wish, of course, to transform Africa into a battleground for a geopolitical fight, and to tear us apart in all directions, and to make us dependent instead of being self-reliant.
Right.
So it's first and foremost up to us to understand how rich we are, and if we decide to collaborate to allow free movement of people, to take care of the African continental free trade area, we will really get where we want to be.
All
So
right.
to be an economic bloc that could deal on equal footing with other blocs like the US, Europe, Russia, and
All
China.
right, Mozambique.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think all of us will agree that we have to organize ourselves in our continents. We have everything to be all right. But also, I think we cannot live without the international cooperation. We just have to reform that international cooperation. Because if you realize now that the decision of President Trump, either we like it or don't like it, but it was a wake-up call for all of us. We realized that the money that they're giving us, 50 million for something in Africa, we just received 10 million, okay? And even inside there, of these 10 million, is divided between many people there, just 1%. And our population, they just have maybe less than 0 point whatever. So let's explore also other, not other partners like Turkey, okay? Like Turkey, we call it South-South cooperation. But also, let's explore Africa itself, because there are countries that are doing well, but we want to go and learn from Europe. Yeah, if you go to Rwanda, I went to Tanzania, told the president of Tanzania, what is going on there? So let's learn from our continent also, so that we can just go ahead. But I agree that we need to have a good governance, to have an African solution for African problems, and we think about our youth. We had protests after election in Mozambique, 4 months of protests. And we realized that we have a youth, that they are there, and they don't have anything to lose. They don't have a history of liberation struggle. They just want their thing to be resolved. And as my brother from Ghana said, we don't have time. Mm-hmm. We just have to do it.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Tanzania.
Thank you very much. I would a little bit digress, but I want to say that do we know our wealth? We, as Africans, we are saying we are the richest continent, but do we know our real wealth? Our wealth is determined by others. The value of our wealth is determined by others. So I wanted to digress a little bit on our education system. We need to change our education system because most countries in the world have already changed their education system. They know the rare earth minerals. They know the new periodic table in chemistry. They know what is nickel, coltan used for. We keep on doing mining, but we don't know the value. That value is determined by someone else, either in West or Eastern bloc. So we need also to do something about our education system. Is we need to train. Professor spoke about leadership training. We need to invest more into leadership training. Otherwise, the rest will be only imposed on us through global democratic systems. We need to have our own democracy, our own definition of democracy. Thank you.
All right, Republic of Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Madame. Je pense que de forum en forum, nous avons déjà pris conscience de nos faiblesses. Et nos faiblesses résident en partie dans le fait que, entre nous-mêmes, nous ne nous faisons pas confiance. Voyez-vous, une organisation comme la CEDEAO, elle a été pendant très longtemps brandie comme la meilleure organisation régionale. Et moi, quand j'étais aux Nations Unies, on parlait de success story, en termes de démocratie, en termes de libre circulation des biens et des personnes. Aujourd'hui, nous avons 3 pays qui sortent de la CEDEAO. Pour quelle raison? Posons-nous la question de savoir pour quelle raison. La CEDEAO fonctionnait particulièrement bien. C'est vrai, comme toute œuvre humaine, elle a besoin de chaque fois d'un toilettage, des tests et tout cela. Mais ça, nous étions sur le chemin, sur la voie de le faire. Donc, c'est la confiance entre nous-mêmes. C'est très important. C'est très important parce que c'est cette confiance qui va nous permettre de créer l'unité dans la diversité et laquelle peut nous amener à maîtriser notre avenir nous-mêmes. Moi, je vois par exemple, nous passons notre temps à dire que nous sommes très riches. Qu'est-ce que nous faisons de cette richesse? Pour investir dans le cacao en Côte d'Ivoire, nous sommes obligés d'aller chercher des Américains ou des Asiatiques. Mais il y a des gens riches en Afrique. Nous avons par exemple en Afrique des champions nationaux. Pourquoi est-ce que quelqu'un qui en a les moyens, au Rwanda ne viendrait pas investir dans le cacao en Côte d'Ivoire et un Ivoirien investir dans le thé là-bas pour avoir un développement autocentré, un développement solidaire? Pourquoi nous ne le ferons pas? Pourquoi est-ce qu'il n'y aurait pas des champions nationaux de l'Afrique qui pourraient aller par exemple au Ghana exploiter le cacao? Et de ce point de vue, je pense que le Ghana et la Côte d'Ivoire offrent un exemple important. Par exemple, nous fixons ensemble, nous avons un organisme commun, et nous fixons ensemble le prix du café et du cacao, ce qui nous permet d'influer sur le cours du cacao dans le monde. L'organisme a son siège au Ghana et est dirigé actuellement par un Ivoirien. Par ces exemples-là que nous pouvons évoluer. Mais si c'est bien de dire chaque fois, oui, nous sommes riches, nous avons ceci, nous avons cela, nous avons, comment dirais-je, les hommes et tout ça. Mais qu'est-ce que nous faisons concrètement? Il faut qu'on se fasse confiance et qu'on crée les conditions justement pour ces investissements. Ça, c'est important. Ça veut dire que nous-mêmes, nos codes d'investissement doivent répondre à des standards qui puissent amener les uns et les autres à aller investir dans les pays. Moi, si j'étais riche, je prendrais le temps d'aller investir au Ghana ou au Rwanda, dans le café, pour venir le vendre en Côte d'Ivoire, plutôt que d'acheter les Lipton qui nous arrivent de Grande-Bretagne. Voilà un peu ce que je pense.
Wow, we need to have trust. The first question. Yeah, kindly introduce yourself and the person you're directing the question to. So you'll just write down the question. We take all questions at once, and then we respond. And as you're responding, we started a bit late, so we'll extend the session by 5 minutes. So as you're responding to the question, just take at least maximum 2 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, dear panelists. Thank you very much for this rich panel. My name is Numuche Traoré. I'm from Côte d'Ivoire. I'm also the president of African student community in Eskishein. I'm student economic department. So my questions, maybe my player to the foreign minister from ECOWAS countries. So I won't speak in French because I'm more comfortable in French language. Sorry. Okay. Messieurs les ministres de la CEDEAO, de la Côte d'Ivoire, du Ghana et du Bénin ici présents, nous avons échangé longuement avec les jeunes de la CEDEAO.
Is it possible for you can come and use my seat so that the translators can actually translate? You can get it. Okay, continue.
Je disais que le constat que nous faisons dans l'Afrique de l'Ouest et aussi dans la diaspora ici avec les jeunes Africains, c'est que nous avons plutôt l'impression que la CEDEAO, plutôt que d'être une communauté pour les peuples et les populations, c'est plutôt une communauté des chefs d'État. Et les mesures qui sont prises sont plutôt notamment des mesures politiques. Et quand c'est comme cela, nous, on ne se retrouve pas là-dedans. Alors nous, les jeunes, on est vraiment touchés par le retrait de ces trois pays, puisque la CEDEAO, comme le ministre l'a dit, c'était une organisation qui était vraiment plébiscitée et félicitée un peu partout. Alors, nous, notre plaidoyer, ou soit ma question, ou la proposition qu'on aimerait peut-être faire, est-ce que suite au retrait de ces trois pays de la CEDEAO s'est-elle remise en question pour dire qu'il y a des coins qui ne vont pas, il faut qu'on essaie de résoudre certains problèmes? Et est-ce qu'il y a-t-il des réformes qui, plutôt que de prendre des mesures politiques, la CEDEAO s'engage comme étant un acteur d'industrialisation, puisque c'est ça qui est le véritable problème, comme l'Union européenne, être un acteur d'industrialisation afin de transformer nos matières premières là-bas et fournir du travail aux jeunes. Merci.
Thank you. The next question, I think I saw, yeah.
I am Dr. Selçuk Aydın, and thank you for the organizer of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum to witness this such a wonderful session. My question is about indeed the birth rate, because right now the African continent has the only exceeding the replacement fertility rate in the world, which is the most strange of the African countries. But when we look at the rest of the world, the modernization process is going to decrease this rate. And my question is about the African countries. So each country, do you think that there would be any other potential modernization process for African countries to solve both problems? Because we are witnessing last 3 decades the neoliberalization of the world, which also caused lots of problems in the Far Asia, and it might be also several problems for the African countries, which is very much relevant to our current problems in world politics, because the current world system is under the transformation, and the United States is the founder of this system, is changing this system, and also is there any other possibility for African countries to propose new system as well, which is very much indeed my interest to African countries to see the philosophical background, because when we look at the media organization, that we are seeing only fragilities of the African countries, the conflicts, war. So my question is about another stretch of the African countries. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. The last, you have a question? Okay, that's the last. Do you have any other question apart from him? That's the last question. Okay.
Thank you very much. My name's Dr. Penyo Butale. I'm the Minister of International Relations from Botswana. Mine is not a question as such, but just to throw the spanner in the works a little bit and remind colleagues that I think the time for us to theorize about problems that need solutions today is gone. I think time for talks about talks is gone. This is the time for Africa to take its place, and remember, if we make sure that we trade amongst ourselves, there's so much that we can do. First of all, I just came from a panel discussion on critical raw materials, and I gave an example that we have soda ash in Botswana. We sell it for a pittance, but you have lithium in Zimbabwe, which they sell for a pittance. But if you put them together, you have lithium carbonate, which is used in car batteries. If you take the situation right now, Botswana produces the best beef. We sell our beef to Europe, but our neighboring countries in DRC and Angola buy their beef from Brazil. Does this make sense? Time for theorizing is gone. Africa must now crystallize its way forward and come and put things in practice. Thank you.
Thank you. The last question. Can we have the mic right behind me? I believe that should be the last question.
Thank you very much, Madam. It was a wonderful opportunity to see and to remember African problems. I represented my country, Turkey, in 8 African countries. I want to see the core questions. Unfortunately, the core questions have not been raised during this panel. Therefore, I would like to ask you the following question. The world is going to integrate in order to challenge, in order to get rid of the challenge of 21st century. How African Union could be modernized or could become effective in order to assume a role similar to the European Union? Will be possible the rise of Pan-Africanism and to bring the African Union to an effective organ to, first of all, to create peace and then, of course, the welfare of the African countries. The example of European Union would be indeed an assess for Africa? This was my question.
Thank you, and it's a pertinent question indeed. So we have 3 questions, if I'm not wrong, because there are 3. One has to do with ECOWAS, where the young people, if I may put it that way, feel like ECOWAS is not living to its mandate. It's more about the presidents just meeting and talking. Then we had the question of modernization, the process of solving the issues that affects Africa, and then the last question. So I will give all of us 2 minutes each to respond to the questions that have been put forth. So if you're responding to a certain question, just say, I'm responding to this question, 2 minutes each. Let's not pass the 2 minutes. So we'll start from the left.
Thank you very much. 2 things I will mention and I will stop. First is I think the fact that USAID has got its support to the Africa or many other countries an opportunity. I will not give the name, but recently I was 2 weeks ago, I was in an African country. One of the ministers told me that they had 17,000 health employees and USAID were paying has been paying their salaries, so they don't know what to do. I think this is an opportunity the question is whether they will invite China or they will develop their own system in there. So that's the one thing, that's a challenge and opportunity. And second, the question was about the birth rate. As far as I know, the birth rate in Africa is 4.2, in Europe 1.2. In Africa, there is no question of birth rate or the more babies. Actually, the issue is having more children is the problem if you cannot give them education. Reverse in Europe, the lack of children, population is the crisis. So Africa is on the reverse side, but 4.2 is, it's a big number. We are talking about 1.2 and 1.7 in many other countries. So that is the opportunity. The education, for example, I also serve as Vice President of Turkish Marif Foundation. We have schools in many countries, including those in the stables, countries in the stable. I think the education and the youth is extremely key. Once that has been addressed, I think the Africa's future is very bright. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we move to Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci beaucoup, madame. Je ne vais pas répondre à la première question, parce que je suis de Côte d'Ivoire. C'est un compatriote qui a posé la question, donc permettre que je ne réponde pas, mais j'ai des frères béninois et libériens. Il a oublié de citer d'ailleurs le Libéria comme faisant partie de la CEDEAO. Le Libéria fait bien partie de la CEDEAO, comme la Sierra Leone et d'autres pays. Moi, je pense que la problématique de l'Afrique ou de la solution peut se résumer en ceci. D'abord, je crois que c'est l'intégration d'abord. L'intégration, c'est-à-dire la mutualisation de nos efforts, de nos intelligences. La confiance par le dialogue. Le dialogue qui, contrairement à ce qu'on pense, est l'arme des forts et non l'arme des faibles. Le dialogue, et puis il y a également la bonne gouvernance. La bonne gouvernance qui permet de créer les conditions d'un investissement. Je parlais tantôt d'Africains qui investissent en Afrique. Il faut soigner le cadre, pas seulement le cadre macroéconomique, mais ne serait-ce que les éléments qui concourent, qui permettent un investissement et peut-être retour sur investissement dans le temps. C'est tout cela qui crée la sécurité. Parce que justement, la bonne gouvernance et tout ce que je viens de citer en amont crée la sécurité. C'est cette sécurité qui, de façon, j'allais dire, subsidiaire, peut permettre à l'Afrique de se retrouver et de créer les conditions d'un développement accéléré. Nous avons tout sur place, nous avons les hommes, nous avons les matières premières. Il faut que nous travaillions dans la confiance les uns dans les autres à transformer, par exemple, les conditions de transformation de nos matières premières, première transformation, pour donner des valeurs ajoutées, conforter nos budgets et surtout, donner de l'espoir à nos braves paysans, nos braves travailleurs qui, justement, concourent chaque jour, travaillent chaque jour à accroître la richesse de nos pays respectifs. Voilà ce que et nous comptons sur vous, par exemple, vous qui êtes à l'étranger, qui apprenez justement les bonnes pratiques. Malheureusement, parfois, quand vous retournez, bon, vous avez autre chose. Vous regardez autrement, ou alors vous voulez vous enrichir immédiatement. Nous, en Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons vu des jeunes qui étaient férus de diplômes, qui étaient bardés de diplômes, qui arrivent et qui veulent très vite être riches et donc qui prennent des chemins un peu tortueux. C'est bien d'interpeller les anciens, mais il est bon parfois aussi de... Nous, nous avons envoyé à l'étranger pour que vous recevez les armes qu'il faut pour venir aider les pays. Le problème n'est pas toujours de récriminer, de poser la question, mais venez participer à l'effort collectif et vous verrez que les choses avanceront. En tout cas, au niveau de la CEDEAO, des efforts se font. Et je crois que mon frère béninois sera notre, ou ma sœur de Libéria sera notre porte-parole. Nous, les ministres de la CEDEAO, pour prendre la parole et vous répondre plus directement. Merci.
Go back home and develop your country also. It's a good challenge, you know, a challenge from the young person to the elderly, to the government, and also another challenge to the young people. Yeah. Tanzania.
Thank you very much. I'll try to make it as short as possible, and it's for my brother colleague from Botswana. I think we have to admit we have a problem, Africa, and we have a problem as Africans. We are usually meeting at these places united in Antalya, FOCAC, TICAD, Russia, Africa, etc., more than we communicate ourselves. This is a main problem. And when we meet in our sub-regional bodies and continental body, we talk about crisis, conflict, Eastern DRC, to resolve. We don't talk about the beef or lithium and how we can trade and cross-border. We only talk with the problem. So we need to have more communication and talk to ourselves. We shouldn't wait for others in Turkey to unite us here in Antalya or China during FOCAC or TICAD. We need to pick up a phone. Nowadays is WhatsApp, thanks to the technology. Before, the calls to Africa was more expensive than to Europe. Europe calls were cheaper. But now, thanks to the power of internet, we can pick up calls and do trade. And I really urge my colleagues as well in our sub-region that when we meet, even to discuss crises and solve the conflict issues, we should also discuss about more economic exchange, removing of these tariff barriers. Even if we are protecting local industry, we should understand and know the value of what we produce and how we can add that value. You mentioned the lithium of Botswana and the neighboring country, how we can add value with each other. Most of these prices are determined by external. We have Tanzanite in Tanzania, which is a blue diamond. The value of Tanzanite, if you go on the internet now, is determined in India, because that is the main base of the blue diamond market, and not in Tanzania. And Tanzanite is only found in Tanzania and the whole world. That's why it's called Tanzanito, or Tanzanite. Thank you.
Thank you. Mozambique. Thank you. First, I just wanted to thank our young, the young from Côte d'Ivoire, the youth that is here. You raise a wonderful thing, not only for ECOWAS, for all the sub-regionals. It's something that has been raised by businessmen, the Turkish businessmen, the role of African Union. Is it really all these organizations there for peoples? Are the people, they feel it, they know about it? So I think it's a challenge for all our organizations. The issue of African Union to play his role is what my brother from Tanzania have said. We have to reinforce our sub-regional organization first so that we can go to the continental. If it don't work, there's no way that we can do anything. Issue of industrialization that you raise, but also modernization that you raise, is an issue. Because if you digitalize our countries, we'll reduce corruption. That is a problem, okay? If you modernize, we'll build the value chain. We have fruits that they're spoiling in our continent. And then we export tomato from somewhere else. But we don't transform, we don't add the value. So we need to do that. So I agree with you. Solution, as my brother from Botswana have said. We need solution now. Bring problems here. All of us, we know the problems. What is the solutions? So we need the solution, definitely. Botswana was saying he was there. The president was in Mozambique. We have fish. with shrimps, they have beef. I said, why don't you exchange? So I agree that we need to have solutions. I think definitely I'll just stop here saying that I agree with all these questions. They're just wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's think of time as we respond to the questions. 2 minutes each. Rwanda.
Thank you. I want to address the question that was asked by the ambassador behind. It's about what would the African Union do to be like the European Union. Yes, and actually he's right, because we have a problem. There was we have a commission in Addis Ababa, but we are still facing with a number of bureaucracy, heavy meetings, many decisions, no strategic focus on what we should be doing. We're talking about the partnership, for example, with China, with Japan, with others. We have, when we have the FOCAC in Beijing, we have 45, 46 African heads of state. But in Addis Ababa, when we have AU summit, we had hardly 20 heads of state. And there is a reason for that. We should not just complain. It's because we are now used with our bureaucracy. So we had in 2016 a reform team that was put in place, headed by President Kagame of Rwanda, with a proposal on institutional and financial reform to make really our commission more focused, and then to get rid, not to depend heavily on foreign aid, because our programs budget was financed at maybe 80% by partners, which was really strange. So we need to focus on those reforms, but yet until now there is reluctance, not from outside but from within the continent, to implement those reforms. Yet they are in our interests. We were talking about the free movement of people. We signed, I think in 2018 in Kigali, the African Continental Free Trade Area, but we also signed an agreement on free movement of people, which is really not implemented. We need to let Africans move on the continent. You know, we have our building blocks, the regional community, economic communities. We should first start with that, to ensure that we remove non-tariff barriers. We ensure that all citizens move around without any hindrance, because, you know, the European Union, they have the Schengen, they can move, but on the continent it became difficult. In Rwanda, we decided, for example, for African citizens to remove visa for African citizens. Actually, we went further, and then we decided actually to allow all citizens of the world to get their visa on arrival. They don't need to ask for visa in the embassies. So we should go that route to do our homework ourselves before complaining from the treatment that we get from outside. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ghana.
Well, thank you very much. Let me commend our young friend Traore for his question, and it should make us reflect on how to make ECOWAS more people-friendly, to meet the hopes and aspirations of the people, and not to become just a club of heads of states. And even within this club, they are not having frank peer review. They allow presidents to change constitutions, extend their terms, and when that is going on, they don't impose sanctions. They look on. They attend their investitures. Then when there is a rebellion by the people, a coup, eventually, that's when they want to impose sanctions and descend heavily. But ECOWAS ought to be more forward-looking and to be frank amongst itself. Leaders who break barriers, negatively deviate from democratic norms, ECOWAS should be bold to point it out. We are seeing another situation unfold in Guinea-Bissau. It should not be tolerated. And then the free movement, the integration, we need to work on that, and it should not just be talk. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire has started something so positively. We form a union on cocoa, because the two of us contribute 70 to 80% of global cocoa production. So now we are calling the shots. That model can be adopted within other sub-regional blocks. And beyond that, we should even start asking ourselves, are we really under obligation to always export? Why should we always export raw material? Why? Can't we say that, look, it's for us. We want to take our time, build our capacity, get the expertise, and create our value addition chains within the continent? What's the rush about? Why should we always, and so when China comes to Ghana and they don't like our terms, easily they can move to Togo or move to Mozambique or move to Angola and get it for cheap. Can't we just slow down? What's all the rush about being looted, being raped on a daily basis? When we can take our time, these resources are going nowhere. They don't have expiry dates. Even the talk about climate change and fossil fuels transitioning is going to take time. So let us build our domestic capacity. We complain about the prices of these raw materials being determined in London and India and all of that. What has stopped us from creating our own Kimberleys, our own African institutions that rate, that assesses these raw materials and gives it the value, and we all should be committed.
Right.
They need us. If we say that this is our value, this is our price, this is only what we are going to do,
all right.
Nobody can put a gun to our heads. And
all
then
right.
Finally on the AU...
In a minute, in less than a minute.
In a minute.
Less than a minute.
Less than a minute.
Thank you.
I honestly think that the African Union can even be better than the EU, because we are not going to be focusing on wars. We will focus on real human development, lifting people out of poverty. I think that we should just commit to Agenda 2063 and start by making sure that we have the real governance, good governance that works, leaders who are honest, who have integrity, dealing with corruption head-on, punishing corrupt officials, and making sure that the natural resources on the continent works to the benefit of the people, and will be better than any other
Thank you.
Government organization.
Thank you, Ghana. Sorry, Liberia.
We're close, so that's why. So I will start where my brother Samuel left off, because that's one of the points I wanted to make. To the ambassador, the question on Africa Union becoming like the EU, my question was why? Why would we want to be like the EU? What makes the EU the standard? And what makes the EU what Africa needs? Africa needs to reimagine the AU that will be fit for purpose for Africans, not compared to anybody else. We are Africans. We're different from Europeans, and we need what works for Africa. So we've seen people set standards for us before. We followed them, and they changed their minds, and we're left in the cold. We need to set our own standards and put our own benchmarks and work towards them. The next point I want to make for our young ECOWAS citizen, I think everybody has spoken to his points very well, but I want to make the point of African diaspora. I think the African diaspora is powerful and is underutilized. The African diaspora mobilize remittances. They are African descent that influence policy in other countries. They are the ones that are shaping sometimes leaders in other countries. And the African diaspora needs to be mobilized to help us reform the African Union. Very important. I think lastly, I want to say, I didn't say this earlier, Liberia is vying for one of the non-permanent seats on the UN Security Council. And Liberia believes very strongly that the support that required for us to get there should be mobilized, because we have a lot of credibility in terms of what works, but also what does not work. And when you're talking about reforming the UN and reforming the UN Security Council when it comes to peacekeeping and others, we have experiences. We have experiences that are important to share in terms of how we reform the UN Security Council. And I think the last point I would make on the question of why should we always export and so forth, why take our minerals out? The world needs what we have. The world needs what we have. And if we are a multipolar world, I will end with that. We need to realize that Africa must be a pole in that multipolarity. We're talking about every other country and I'm mentioning Africa. We are a pole already. We have to recognize it and stand grounded in that pole. Thank you.
Thank you. Benin.
Merci. Je vais commencer par notre jeune frère Traoré sur la CEDEAO et lui dire simplement que, exactement comme l'Union africaine, malheureusement la CEDEAO, il faut que nous le reconnaissions, est devenue une institution bureaucratique et que c'est un fait. Dans la CEDEAO, il y a un E qui est économique et malheureusement, c'est vrai, nous faisons essentiellement des réunions politiques et nous n'avons pas travaillé assez sur le volet économique. Maintenant, est-ce que c'est la raison pour laquelle nous devons décider de casser la maison? Nous, personnellement, au niveau du Bénin, nous pensons que non. Mais si nos frères du Mali, du Niger et du Burkina Faso ont fait ce choix, nous respectons leur choix. Par contre, nous devons être conscients d'une chose, personne ne déménagera. La géographie dicte la diplomatie et les relations internationales. Le Niger ne déménagera pas, le Burkina ne déménagera pas, le Mali ne déménagera pas. Ils resteront à la même place sur une carte. Et la CEDEAO est née en 1975. Avant 1975, comme l'a dit ma sœur, nos populations circulaient. Les Akans n'ont pas attendu la CEDEAO pour circuler entre la Côte d'Ivoire et le Ghana. Moi, je suis Yoruba. On n'a pas attendu la CEDEAO pour que les gens circulent entre le Nigeria, le Bénin, le Togo, le Ghana. Donc, je pense que fondamentalement, il faut que nous laissions tout cela derrière nous et que nous nous concentrions sur ce qui est important. Ce qui est important aujourd'hui, c'est de reconnaître que nous sommes obligés de travailler ensemble. Quels que soient les choix d'organisation que nous faisons, nous avons l'obligation de travailler ensemble sur des sujets importants. La libre circulation des personnes, la libre circulation des biens. Donc là-dessus, je pense qu'il ne devrait pas y avoir de problème. Et je voudrais lui dire à notre jeune frère que personne ne viendra développer l'Afrique à notre place. Ni nos amis turcs, ni nos amis chinois, ni nos amis américains. Personne ne viendra développer l'Afrique à la place des Africains. Si les Africains eux-mêmes ne se respectent pas, ne décident pas de rentrer construire leur continent, personne ne construira l'Afrique à notre place. Et si vous réussissez en dehors du continent africain, tant qu'il y aura des poches de pauvreté sur le continent africain, vous avez beau être le plus brillant aux États-Unis, en France ou ailleurs, on ne vous respectera pas. On vous regardera en fonction de ce qui se passe sur votre continent. Donc nous devons travailler ensemble. La jeunesse, notre diaspora, elle a sa place, elle doit venir sur le continent. Et ça me permet de parler d'un dernier point sur la modernisation du continent africain. Il y a des innovations essentielles qui sont nées sur le continent africain. Vous prenez le mobile money. C'est une création du continent africain qu'aujourd'hui la Chine a adopté et a masterisé, l'a amené à un niveau beaucoup plus important. Quand sur le continent, nous décidons de nous asseoir pour régler des problèmes, par porter des solutions aux problèmes de nos populations, nos jeunes sont capables d'innovations majeures. Et notre rôle en tant que politique, c'est de les accompagner, de faire en sorte qu'ils trouvent la place pour pouvoir faire éclore en fait ces besoins. Et je finirai en disant que quand nous exportons les matières premières brutes, en réalité, nous exportons des emplois. Parce que le Bénin est le premier producteur de coton sur le continent africain. Jusqu'à il n'y a pas longtemps, nous exportions 95% de notre coton en Chine, au Vietnam, au Bangladesh. Et puis nous importons tous les tenues que nous portons. Les emplois sont créés de l'autre côté. Pareil pour le cajou. Le cajou est produit en Côte d'Ivoire, en Tanzanie, au Bénin, au Ghana. Et le Vietnam, aujourd'hui, en produisant moins que la Côte d'Ivoire, est le pays qui transforme 75% du cajou mondial. Donc oui, il faut absolument que nous-mêmes, nous mettions en place des politiques qui favorisent la transformation et la création d'emplois sur le continent. Et je suis d'accord avec mon frère sur le fait qu'il faut qu'on assume à un moment donné de pouvoir dire nous refusons les exportations. Nous refusons d'exporter des produits. C'est dur parfois, on aura des problèmes avec nos paysans qui vont nous dire on a la possibilité d'aller acheter, de vendre notre produit 2 fois plus cher parce que nous savons que les autres parties du monde ne veulent pas que nous transformions. Mais c'est tout à fait normal. Et c'est à nous de trouver les politiques, la volonté, le courage pour pouvoir le faire. Merci.
Thank you. I love the passion that every foreign affairs minister has, including the professor of Turkish National Defense University, Mehmet Ozkan. And even as we bring this session to an end, this is what I'd like to say. For Africa to become an important actor in international politics, it must strategically use its numbers and the shared history to overcome the challenges of lack of economic and military power, which focuses it to enter into agreements. And I believe those agreements, some of the continental agreements, are going to be made by you people who are seated here. You have the solution that you can give the heads of states. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Have a beautiful day.